Hi, this is Elizabeth Gearhart. I'm here with Joseph Wesley of JNL Creative Solutions. Joseph told me he doesn't see dead people, but
I do see things that people don't see about themselves. What I'm learning in my industry is that sometimes when I go back in the day when we had physical meetings and I'm new to that networking group, I might stand up for my soundbite and I'll say, show of hands, how many people in the room are only second best at what they do and they're darn proud about it? Well, of course, no hands go up because everybody says I'm the best. But then they'll confide in me privately that nobody seems to be buying it. And the challenge is everybody says it. And the poor consumer without a qualifier will likely treat you as a commodity because they've got so many choices, particularly today with searches in Google and YouTube format. So the challenge is not to tell people you're the best because anybody can do that, but to provide your unique brand value, I call it, that nobody else has, that people can see for themselves you're the best at what you do in your market. And I can make that usually, I won't always guarantee, but usually can make that observation and that distinction for your business. And to say for the more mechanical people in the group, the business types, I'm a biology major, I talk about discovering your unique brand value, but when you're web designer, when your business coach, when your marketing person asks you, what's your value proposition? You'll have an answer for them that they can work with and give you a maximal job for you to be competitive in your market.
well, that is so important. So it's important not just for your marketing people, but if you're in a position that you ever want to get investment funding or
Mhm.
even grants or loans from the Small Business Administration or wherever, that's one of the first questions they ask, right?
That's true.
And
That's,
and it is hard to see that for ourselves. I mean, I've struggled with it for Fireside because there's so many different pieces to this.
mhm.
And when I sit people down for these interviews, I say, tell me your most important thing in the first 10 seconds. And then we go on through the interview, and I feel like sometimes something more important comes out later that they
Mm.
hadn't really thought was as important as I would as a consumer. Does
Right.
that so I so how do you get them, like how could you get me to really zero in on the short message, the value proposition?
Well, I use the terms not in a similar manner, brand value versus value proposition. I work this backwards, my answer. Value proposition is the implementation side of what are we going to offer your market. You want to address the challenge of why should they care enough to give you their money and give you their time? And I get that. But before we provide a value proposition, you have to know first your brand value. What makes you unique? And I use a musical metaphor. Let's say my wife and I are talking about doing something special this weekend, and we both like singing performers. And so I'm going to surprise her and buy 2 tickets to my favorite performer, say for Saturday afternoon or evening. And she does the same thing without my knowledge. So as we're trying to surprise each other on Thursday, we find out we have 4 tickets for 2 people. And I've got 2 extras left over. So I'll come to you and I'll say, Elizabeth, I want to do you a favor. I'm going to reduce some tickets for you. I'm stuck. If you take them for free, I'd be a happy kind of guy, but I'm a marketing person. And say, look, I have 2 tickets for you to go to Saturday night. You've got to choose, and I'll take the other 2. But without a qualifier, you're going to ask me questions likely, well, same time? Yes. Same location? No. Opposite directions. Same price? Yes. And you might then ask, well, what's the parking like? Is it going into traffic, against traffic? What are the restaurants in the area? And these are normal questions people were asked because you're still hearing singing performer and you don't have any sense of brand value or value proposition. But if I were to tell you that, well, one singer is Adele and the other one's Beyonce, then all of a sudden it speaks for itself because your draw is to that particular brand that resonates with who you are, the persona. And that's why this issue of brand value converting to value proposition is important for people. And I don't think most of the people I've bumped into understand that distinction or have the tools to provide it to their marketing person or the coach person, or the web designer person. So I happen to be very good at asking questions. And as I say, again, I don't see dead people, but I can see things people don't see about themselves. And I connect the dots in a manner that people will often say, geez, I never thought about that before. Or nobody's ever asked me that before. And I told one person, stick with me long enough, and you'll get to ask that question a lot more often, or make that exclamation a lot more often. So this is what I do. I help people through, I would say, an interview process. It won't be a one-shot deal. Likely, you've talked about, we had a discussion a little bit earlier, learning about the people. This interview, you're asking me about myself. And I'll hear things, I see things in a virtual sense that people don't see about themselves. And each of us have a unique brand value. And the reason that's important, I don't have to be a Beyonce for everybody or an Adele for everybody. You have to be very good for the market that resonates with my style. That's what I do for my clients.
Wow. So you're doing exactly what I'm trying to do with these interviews, only in a different way. I'm trying to show people interviews of people so they can see who resonates with them before they call them up to do work with them.
True.
And it's important because, I don't want, if I'm looking to buy something, I don't want somebody coming and offering me something that is made for a man.
Mhm.
Right?
True. Well, to be politically correct, I may not comment on that one way or the other, but technically I agree with you totally what you're saying.
So that's the whole targeted marketing thing, but you're really wasting your money if you're trying to appeal to the wrong audience.
Sure.
And if you don't know what your actual value to a potential client or customer would be, then there's no way that you can find the right audience.
Well, people don't understand. People try, business owners, and I say people because we are really people, although we can say business owners. We don't understand collectively, we're not going to be all things for all people. And even the Walmarts and the Targets and the Amazons have competitors that thrive very well because they've defined their niche very strongly. So that takes some of the burden off that particular business owner, or even a company entity perhaps, that worries about being the best. No, just be extremely very good, and that might be redundant, at what you do in your niche market. So it requires some definition of your niche market. So it's a lot of things about more than just your brand value. That what I've learned is the more you clarify your brand value, the more you define your market. So it feeds on itself because you start getting positive feedback and positive responses. Say, this works. So you need to dig deeper in that direction and become more proficient with it. And all of us have it. It's a matter of your DNA, your genetic code, your history, your training, whatever it may be. We all have unique factor. We just don't know it. We don't appreciate it. We don't present it.
So how long does it take you working with somebody to really get down to that final kernel of truth, shall we say?
Now, that's a good question. It depends. When somebody would ask me, to phrase that differently, in a sense of scope of work, people want to know what's it going to cost me. That you've asked perhaps in a very polite manner, in a more philosophical manner, and I get that. And I'll give another story. I like to tell stories. I was at a networking group several years back, and I joined, let's say, in April, and they had different 3 or 4 meetings during the month, recurrent. And there's a guy I would bump into, hi, how are you? We pass cards back and forth. He happened to be a CPA. I do what I do, and that was pretty much it. But it was a Christmas event that happened, or holiday, it might've been Christmas, and I like to eat. So I showed up early. And he showed up early. So we were kind of there almost by ourselves. We actually began talking to each other. And I learned what his desire was to grow his business. He had a sense what that point would be, minimally speaking. And then he began asking me what I do. And I'm in a networking state of mind. So we start walking over to one of the wait tables where things were opened up and the heat was disappearing from the food quickly. And all of a sudden I heard him ask me, so what's this going to cost me? $1,000, $5,000, $10,000? And I'm kind of stunned because I'm still in a casual networking mode, which might've been why it works so well. And as I looked at him, I saw that he was prepared to argue with me on price. I'm still trying to catch up to the conversation. And I realized that no matter what answer I gave him, even though he gave me a range to play with, it's going to be too much money. So what I said to him, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to do two things. I'd like to have coffee with you, 20 minutes each, no cost, 2 episodes. And I said two things will happen. I'll get a better sense of the scope of work. You'll get a better sense of the value it can provide your business. At that point, he looked away, smiled, and nodded, and our life together was different thereafter. So my technique is to get an initial conversation with you, minimally to get a sense of what you do in part. And I really don't care about that. I don't. I want to know who you are. And I'll tell you what my ideal client is not somebody who says, I want to make a lot of money. And I don't have a problem with that philosophically, but I can't do anything for you, because if I can't do it for your clients, I can't do it for you either. So I'm interviewing you more than you're interviewing me. I first kind of do something for you because I don't need bad publicity or having to fight a bill. So if I can find something about you as an initial process, then we'll have a second discussion. And again, about 20 minutes each to give you a sense of scope of work. And you get a better sense of the value and the nature of the questions I ask. And my technique is I'll give a summary at some point. Here's what I gather about who you are, the persona. And more than not, people nod, yeah, that's true, right? Yeah, sure. And then what happens, I start working a little further out on the plank of the ship, and I'm going to get to a point where you don't quite understand or know what I'm talking about, because now it's my field of expertise and less your field of expertise and knowledge. But the momentum is I've been right so far about you. Maybe I'm still right about what I'm saying now, even though it's not intuitive for you. And at that point, we can now agree on, as one guy said, well, all this fancy talk about brand value and discovering it, people are still going to ask you your cost. That's true. But if people see value in what you're doing, the less focus on the commodity, cheapest side of the interaction and more on the value back to me side. So as a provider of service that gives me more negotiating space to talk with that particular person, they get a better sense I'm not there just for the money, but I'm actually there to make you more visible, of more value to your market. So that's the best answer I can give you on how long it takes and my price. And by the way, that's my 30-second elevator pitch.
So who is your ideal client? Who is your typical client? Who are you looking to work with?
Well, those are almost 3 different questions. My ideal client is a decision maker. And I say that what I've learned about entrepreneurs, they know their company, they know their business, they know their employees, they know their market, but they also know their competition. And they're always looking for a greater edge beyond where they are at the moment. As one guy said to me, and he was an attorney, he's been interviewed by Larry King a few times. He's a trial attorney. He's been interviewed by Crime Stoppers a few times. He's got an active website. He's got a nonprofit he supports in an aggressive manner, productive manner. He says, but Joe, these things I'm doing, everybody else can do also. I need to do something different to stay ahead of the competition. So he liked my approach because I was offering that unique brand value concept to him that's unique to him, that nobody else can compare to. And that's important because we can get a very good SEO or web designer, but they may also be providing the designs for your competition. And I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but there's still some aspect about who you are as a persona that nobody else can touch, no matter how hard they try to do it. So I've forgotten the question. I got off of my subject, my storytelling again. If you could repeat it, I take that. But it's, so who would I want to work with? A decision maker who says, I want to do something better, something different, something better for my business to stay ahead of the competition. And in today's market, and I say today's market with that, coronavirus is the more formal term. I've just did a video to reduce it from coronavirus to COVID-19 to C19. And I did that deliberately because once we get rid of that bad, fancy, ugly word in our heads, we can now use C19 as a stepping stone to success. I read a few things that says throughout human history, the most successful growth moments have occurred after episodes of chaos.
Mhm.
And I believe that firmly. And it's an important factor in a time sense for people who really today want to get ahead, because people are looking for someone that has a sense of more secured sense of foundation, of stepping stones, because we're all in the same boat, by the way. So people are much more open-minded about doing something different. And that's why actually my business has been stronger now since COVID-19 invoked than it was beforehand, because people tend to be procedurally functional, precedent protocols, a comfort zone. And if we want to be a part of that future growth spurt, then, and a lot of people I'm bumping into fill that category, they're much more inclined to want to do business with me. And that's my ideal client, ultimately.
Okay, great. So, what about you've given a couple of kind of examples. What about giving me an example of somebody that you worked with from start to finish and how it changed what they're doing?
Okay, well, I'm not sure if I change what they do. That's more for the people who are the marketing types. That's dealing with the value proposition side. So I'm very particular about helping you discover your unique brand value. I don't do the mechanics. You face, I'm laughing at myself. They say in business, you don't say what you don't do. I was a biology major, so I'm all over the place with what I don't do. So once we discover it, and I'll say it different format. One business says that, well, they have a redesign of the website. So maybe I can speak with the web designer to help implement their new discovery. And that's as far as I would go. I don't presume or pretend to be these. So I would bring in experts based on need to say, now that I've done my part, and it likely won't be 1 or 2 days. It could very well be several sessions, but I could certainly take it on bringing in outside resources to help you implement. Now, if you already have your own web designer, fine. You already have your business coach, fine. But the moment these people will ask, what's your value proposition, or if you're in a more a business plan format, how are you different from everybody else, then I want to give you the ability to give a very clear answer that makes the job of your agent much easier for you. So you get better dollar value of your money and the time they spend also. I'm not sure how clearly that answers your question, but it could be a solopreneur. It could be a small business. It could be, it likely won't be, back to what I don't do, it likely won't be a huge corporation, because I don't want to work up the food chain, too tedious and too problematic for me. But certainly a middle-sized business down to a solopreneur could very well be ideal clients for me. And it could be one person, or if you have a staff, key staff that works with you, it could be people also. And I'm not going to filter it down to multiple brand value people, but if it's a collective effort, I need to get a sense of your staff also, because the philosophy you set for your business is critically important. I firmly believe in any company, if you have 1 or 2 bad apples, it happens. But if the whole office is having problems, then it's leadership or lack of. So in that instance, I would work on discovering what is, again, the unique brand value. That's maybe a little bit esoteric. And some people might say, well, what's your mission? What's your pain points? And again, those are the marketing types who implement. I take it, I think, I like to say dig deeper than that and figure out who is this person who I'm speaking with? What's their motivation? What's their value system? What's their habits, the history of how they approach things? And again, collect the dots in a manner that says, here's the picture or image what I see of you. And we might do some negotiating on it, because there may be some points I'm missing. Certainly the likely points they haven't considered. And at some point I says, I'm ready to introduce you to the world of the marketing people to implement your value proposition at this point. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I just want to ask you too, are you doing this over Zoom, over phone? Are you doing in-person visits at this point? Right now, we're in the first day of September 2020. We're in the Northeast. We're kind of under quarantine. So were you doing it in person before and switched to Zoom now, or?
Well, that's an easy question. I can be much more brief than that. My legal name is JNL Creative Tours, LLC. And I realized that in today's market, that term gets lost. Tours, you're not going to be rubbing shoulders for some time in our likelihood. So I'd use the audience as I gave my example about this wine tasting, I used the audience to connect the concept of the value of the entity, the principles of that entity. And the thinking was, if you provide, rephrase that, let me tell you my story, and I'm gonna give you a different answer. I was kind of a bookworm back in school. And I'll say now, I'll say a social nerd. To even be more blunt, I was a social retard, even into college syndrome. And I was on a third date once with a girl, and she didn't ask me. She said to me, "You don't date very often, do you?" And I said, "No, thank you for laughing. I appreciate your sympathy on that." And I said, "No, I don't." And she asked me, "Why not?" Well, we were in a relationship. It was a sincere question. She was not being facetious or sarcastic. And I felt she deserved a sincere answer. So I thought about it, because I really hadn't before. And I said, it's like trying to go for that first kiss. Do I kind of stretch and try to sneak up on it, or just go ahead and jump her bones? And I says, "I'm not a bone jumper." And she laughed at that. She smiled at it. And we got along fine. Now, even as bad as I was in my senior year of college syndrome, as a 13-year-old boy, I realized if I wanted a girl to like me, I'd carry her books home for her. Because if she liked the action, she'd like the perpetrator of the action. So what we forget as human beings, we have to take down courses on how to network and how to relate. I don't understand that concept. But that being said, what my initial program was in tour events was to get people to like the experience you provide for them. And in doing that, that person, that audience is more inclined to say, that person gets me. They relate to me, and therefore I can relate to them. And if I can do that on a personal level, maybe they'll be as valued to me on a professional level also. Well, COVID-19 changed that, to be blunt. And it's actually a good thing. It's forced me now to think and focus on the client and not the external factors or facets to get your audience to that client. So let me focus on you. And so now, yes, much more social media, the Zoom concept. I bought a new microphone. I too will be start doing podcasting for different reasons. I went out and bought a device that would allow me to put in a same simultaneous manner, sorry for the redundancy, to Facebook and LinkedIn and Zoom and everything else, tidbits of stuff. I'm much more aggressive now about social media publications. And actually, again, the irony of it, that the time I used to spend driving back and forth in traffic would easily be 45 minutes plus to get there, 45 minutes to get back. So we're already at 3 hours, plus the hour and a half to 2 hours of the event. That now you're talking 5 to 6 hours. You do 2 of those a day. If that many, your day is done. I'm in my private office the whole time. And my greatest effort is finding out where I put my slippers so I can put them on to rush to my workstation. I've got all this time to be creative and to learn stuff. And as I'm learning more, I'm discovering more. And that might, again, be redundant. Some people can learn, may not discover. And I've developed better tools, mechanical tools, but also internal tools to share out with my clients, to discover more about them. And again, I develop resources. You're an attorney, I'm not. So if somebody has a need for their business, I could refer them, hey, I know this group that might have value for you. So I have more time to develop resources, but more time to develop the skills of what I do to provide for my client.
Excellent.
Again, I forgot the question, but that answers it. That's my answer.
So is there anything else that potential clients would need to know about your business that we haven't covered?
I think the one point I would say is, if you are, I'll address it in a different manner. I was working in a project early on the COVID-19 format on a lark for a client. I thought I'd do a Google search. And I chose a term that people would readily understand: overhead garage door repairman. And I said deliberately in the search, near me, so I didn't want anybody from Anchorage, Alaska coming up in the search. And in under 1 second, to be precise, 0.03 seconds, I got not 10,000 or 100,000, I got 1.5 million hits on that title alone. Now, if you drop off 90% of that, you're still talking a good 100,000 people. And the poor client to be without a qualifier will treat it again as a commodity. Who's the closest to me? Who's offering a special deal for that moment? Who can see me now versus 2 days from now? And they still may not be making the best decision as a result of that, because they just don't feel comfortable with, even for commodity-based decision making, they don't feel comfortable with making that money spent. So a client who's listening, a client to be, says, this guy makes sense to me. I like his approach. And these are the people who are drawn to me. I like the sense, and I'm often hearing terms like, well, Joe, it sounds like you really care about wanting to do good by your client, that you're really concerned about giving them the best value possible. If any of that makes sense to you, that's the person likely who might give me a call. It doesn't really matter what you do. If I feel I can't help you, I'll tell you. But I'd like to believe that my style of presentation, my unique brand value, to say it like that, is I want to make sure that I do something for you that's nobody's done before in a manner that's not been done before. And if that makes sense to you, please connect with me and let's talk some more.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you also. I like this. Now, to the audience who's still listening to us, and something what I should have done at the very beginning, perhaps, and what to expect from this encounter, I didn't do that. So that's my shortcoming on that. But one of the things I asked Elizabeth during the cutoff, there's a slightly edited version here, is what does she do as a business? She mentioned Fireside. I see the name all over the place, and I'm clueless about the concept of it. And it's the nature of who I am, my technique, my style, my curiosity. Could you tell me something about yourself, Elizabeth, and who you are and what your company does?
Sure. So it's Fireside Directory, and the tagline is Igniting Connections. So it grew out of a project my husband and I are doing. We do a radio show and podcast on iHeart, on one of their radio stations, where we interview entrepreneurs. And I wanted to do something of my own. And I worked with the coach, one session with this woman, Sharon Lynn Wyeth, and a few days later got the aha and said, what if I did a video directory? I was going to start with lawyers. And then when COVID hit, and I had a whole thing planned out, or video studios, videographers, then COVID hit. And I thought, well, I'll expand it to small business in general, and I'll do it all by Zoom. And so why me? Why am I doing this? I learned how to interview people on this podcast and this radio show just by doing it.
I don't understand that. How do I know you know that? What is it you just by doing it? What's your skill? Where do you get it from?
So I think my skill comes from being naturally curious about people.
Okay.
About what they do in their businesses. I mean, I could sit down with somebody and ask them 20 questions. I really do I'm very curious about other people.
Okay.
And so when people would come to the radio station to record the radio show with my husband and me, we were interviewing them, entrepreneurs and people that were very high up in the entrepreneurial world as our guests. They would come in pretty nervous, and they would leave really relaxed and say, that was easier than I thought. Because we tried to make it comfortable for them and make it more promoting their product than getting ripped apart like on some of these pitch competitions. And so I took those skills to do these interviews, and I feel like my curiosity really helps me dig down and find out, not probably as good as you do, but get at least half the way to where you're getting, where I can,
which is way ahead of most people, I would say too.
Yeah, and pull things out of people that their potential clients really want to know too, right? And so that's really what I'm trying to do, and help people promote themselves. So why would anybody do this? Right now it's free because we're in quarantine, and I'm building the site. It's new. People aren't really they're getting some value, but for the person such as yourself who's interviewing, one, you get to talk about yourself and your business in a relaxed interview format, which is a lot easier than standing in front of a camera.
True.
And just saying it.
True.
And I can ask you questions. If you've done something spectacular that you want to talk about, I can ask you the questions about it, so it doesn't sound like you're self-aggrandizing.
Okay. Now, I have to give a disclaimer, folks. We did not prepare questions before this. So what you just said is actually truism here.
Yeah. And then, and So for someone like you, I have a marketing plan for this. Goes on a YouTube channel and a website. And I don't
Mhm.
know if most people care about this or know it, but Google owns YouTube now. And Google and YouTube are both owned by this company called Alphabet. And so Google is not only looking at your website for Google, it's looking at your YouTube channel for Google too.
Mhm.
And so, and it likes educational channels. So whichever, if you can do things right in YouTube, and there's a lot of different tricks that I've been learning just by doing research, that helps your website on Google. So the two kind of go hand in hand, the YouTube channel and the website.
Okay.
And this video gets embedded into my website. And then I have plans not only to SEO, I do some SEO immediately, which is helping the Google spiders find you, but I also have plans to promote these. And I can not only use my own social media and my own ideas, but I also have access to this radio show social media, which we've been building for 2 years. So I can offer you that.
And what is that radio show?
It's called Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show. It's for
Right.
entrepreneurs. And the difference between the radio show and Fireside is the radio show we have entrepreneurs on. Fireside is for more existing businesses and entrepreneurs too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to interrupt because you have my curiosity. If I want to learn more about that radio show, what do I have to do to get more information about it?
Just talk to me. So
I'm talking. Give me something. What channel, what station, what time? How does that work?
right. So I'll tell you about it. So, I mean, you could come on as an executive spotlight. Maybe we have different levels. So we have a entrepreneur, somebody who's way up in the entrepreneurial world. So for instance, we had the guy that invented Pictionary and made millions of dollars off it. He was our guest speaker.
Right.
People that have had their businesses for a while and are still doing well in this environment. So that would be where you would fit in. That's called an executive spotlight. Then we have presenters who are starting new companies or trying to get something off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have usually a couple of them. So we have 4 people come in per show, a guest, either 3 presenters or a guest and executive spotlight, and 2 presenters. We were recording the show in the iHeart studios in New York before COVID hit. We had a glass wall with our producer behind it and this big couple of mixing boards, and he'd be running around. He'd run in and he'd say, no, you didn't do that right. It was really fun. And now we're doing him over Zoom, which is not nearly as good, but he can still take the sound.
Right.
He can put it on iHeartRadio. So what does that mean? So the show airs on WOR 710.
Oh, let me write that down.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that. What was that again?
WOR
710
in New York.
Okay.
It's also on the iHeart app, and we put it on we have a website and a YouTube channel for Passage to Profit. So the video from Zoom goes on the YouTube channel.
Right.
We also have a lot of social media around it.
Excuse me, are you a certain time of the day that comes? Is it weekly, daily?
So it's Sunday evenings at 11. And the reason why we have to pay for the advertising, and we couldn't afford the primetime spot, and it's once a week. But what's been happening for us during quarantine, couple things. First of all, that radio station, it's usually politics during the week and what they call lifestyle on the weekend. So we're Sunday evening at 11 because we're during lifestyle. And we're considered advertisers. What's happening is that they're getting more advertising spots that aren't always filled. And when that happens, they'll put our show in there. So our show is running 2 to 3 times every weekend now.
Okay. Nice.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that WOR 710 has seen their listenership go way up during this time. And
I'm assuming this was after you started your presentation to the radio station, right?
It was all because of us, yeah. Not really, but I do think that people find it interesting to listen to other people. So we interview people, so we go back and forth. So it's more, it's not just somebody sitting here talking. Maybe it's like we're sitting around a table having coffee together, and we're just all having this big discussion. I think the people that we get are interesting. It's fun. It's really fun to talk to them, and there's so much we learn.
Now that tells me something about you. You're talking about my technique. The people we get are fun. And there's a phrase that says you can get a sense of who a person is by who they associate with them and back and forth. So right off the bat, I know that you have, besides your presentation, because people would say, I'm good at what I do. But when you get people who are good at what they do, who are fun, who are productive, then that speaks the quality of what you provide also. So that would be a peak of what I consider part of your brand value
Ah,
in technique. And it's, as I watch you, your presentation is sincere. Some people can have a good presentation style. Let me say this differently. I use humor as part of my technique of giving information out to people, because I think if people are laughing with you, they get it. It's because they identify with what you're saying to share that emotional moment with you. And again, if they get the emotional side of it, at some point the left brain clicks in and say maybe they get the business, a professional side also. But I've talked to people and share humor, and they laugh like they've just passed gas. They cover their mouth and like, did I do that? And so, but you're very spontaneous with it. It's your whole body that laughs. It tells me you appreciate yourself. You like good engagement back and forth. So I can see where this program that you do, it could be a very, very good program for people who, and I like your terminology in the evening at 11 o'clock. You're very artful in how you use that term, but it shows also some savvy, some smartness too. So I like the combination of humor and skill factor.
well, thank you. Thank you.
And so to the audience, again, it was asked, Elizabeth, had asked me, what do I do? Perhaps how I go about it. This was an example, but I did it in part. What happened here when we shut down this initial presentation, I asked her, what do you do? Because I want to know. And that's why we decided to come back up again and share it. So I appreciate your flexibility, your spontaneity, your creativity that it reflects to allow it to happen. So I have no surprise at all that people who come on your program are well qualified, well worth listening to, well worth being a part of. And I thank you for the opportunity. And I do hope to get you hinted at an invite to be a part of your radio station. I would love to be a part of it also.
Yes, well, definitely. I'll put you on the list. So, yeah,
Okay.
it's easier with,
I'm
as you said, we don't have to go to New York, right? So,
right. And I tell people, look, my wife, I've been married for over 25 years. She can talk and talk and talk. And I'm a guy. So after a while, it says, I'm talked out. I got nothing more to say. I'm done for the moment. I appreciate the interview, and I look forward to being more a part of your program.
great. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, also. Looking to hear from you again shortly.